So folks, good evening. My name is Marcus Pochner. I'm a consultant to the Kensington team here. I know everything except how to change slides. Sorry, Jasper. How do I do that? Oh, Dan's in charge. Okay. So I'm going to first start here with just a couple of introductions in just a moment. I want to just kind of go through this again. We have an hour together. I bet we go through about a 20 or 25 minute presentation, then leave time for question and answer. I'll reset the stage. So maybe if I can just get kind of an understanding of the room, who has been to one of our previous presentations on this site? Pretty good. Okay, so probably over half, but I certainly won't try to be very repetitive on some of the information, but if there's something you want me to clarify, please let me know. So this is what we hope to accomplish today. We're going to get through our introductions, talk about community outreach, the project location, obviously just down the street here, talk about how the process works in the city of Lafayette, and the project mission, and then the very important Q&A. So I just want to provide that. That's the stage that we're going to. I do want to just introduce the team here. You can go to the next slide, please. This shows our team. I represent Kensington Development Partners. This is Jay Eck with Kensington. Jay, do you want to just say hi for 2 minutes and introduce the rest of the team? I'm sorry, Jared. What did I say? I apologize. Yes.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm Jared Eck. I'm a development manager with Kensington Development Partners. And then, hello everyone. My name is Dan Ray. I'm the Director of Development Services here at Kensington.
I'm Jeff Plank. I'm on Kimley Horn, a consultant side, the traffic engineer, so I hear all your phones all at once.
That's great. I do want to acknowledge, so Jared Eck is here. Jared and his father, Jay, are Kensington Development and a number of partners there. Jay was here as well last time. So the rest of our team, Design Workshop, is the kind of planner for the site, and then also Studio PPA is the architect and planner. My company, the Pochner Company. Then the city is here as well. The planning director's here, but we're really here to take your questions and comments. This is such an important part of the city process to provide that. The city does an amazing job of listening as well, and I'll talk about their process and how we go through that. Next slide. Project timeline. This is where we're headed. Go ahead. So folks, you know the neighborhood very well. I was chuckling today to see to really get filled in, right? This 9 mile is all built out. Lowe's is built out. The only Google Earth shows it in winter, so it doesn't really show up very well in this. So we all understand this is developed now. Of course, Beacon Hill, Stonehenge. The subject property is right at 40 acres. The Coles south of Lucerne, and then the Silo neighborhood, which is the ever-emerging Silo neighborhood, is building pretty rapidly right now. Just maybe who's here Stonehenge or Boulder County residents? Great, okay, and then how about Beacon Hill, this resident here, okay? You all sat together like neighbors, that's wonderful, so I'll try to remember that. So kind of where that's from, and honestly, if we get to Q&A and I'm not understanding something, maybe just remind me like where you're from so the context will make sense to us so we can answer the question. So I will just point out, we all know this area, of course, Highway 287 and Arapahoe Road. I shared last time when I went to school at CU Boulder, Arapahoe Road, this was a very different place, right? So I understand it, I'm a native, I know how much this area has changed. I think we talk a lot about the differences. Obviously, you see the Lowe's here, the Kohl's, the Walmart here, understanding a little of that, and then the very important transitioning to Boulder County, to larger lots, to ranches, to farms that have been there, really understanding the traditions and the transitions that we need to make on the site. Next slide, please. So this is what we're doing. We're going through the City of Lafayette process, and our project request is we are doing a planned unit development. We are doing the sketch plan. It's the very first thing you do, a sketch, kind of an outline of the plan of what we want to propose. We would do, along with that, a rezoning and an annexation. So I want to be very clear about that. All three of these things happen. So our request, and you can see it in bold, is really the sketch plan and then starting or initiating the annexation process as well. Next slide. So this is probably a better image of the city's process. And again, we kind of go through that. The city leads us through that. So the city is certainly the expert on this, but they have a great redesign system. So planned unit development, PUD. So if you hear me say that, that's the PUD process. And you see that first box is the sketch plan, sketch. Lafayette's been so thoughtful, they want to know the vision of the site and what's going to happen on the site before they annex it into the city. It is planned to be annexed. This is in the growth boundary. This site has been planned to zone or come into Lafayette, but they're very thoughtful about, we actually want to understand what you're proposing before we accept that annexation. So that's why we start with the sketch plan. You go to Planning Commission and City Council, then a preliminary plan, and then the final PUD goes to City Council. You initiate the annexation now. There's a petition that you file. There's all the legal processing that goes along. But that does not get approved until there's a final PUD. So it's way down the road. But the City Council wants to, again, understand the planning of the sketch PUD and the preliminary plan. After all of this, then we go to subdivision and infrastructure design, and then the site plan. So I just want to be very clear. It's kind of frustrating sometimes. Site plan, the specificity, the architecture, the layout, all of those things are quite a bit down the road. We are really almost in bubble plans and the uses that would be allowed on the site. Next slide. So folks, this is a little bit probably more of what the sketch plan is. Again, you see the sequencing and the ways it goes through it. It's really important, that second bullet there, it's the purpose is to review the concept and the appropriateness of the proposed use. So in a lot of ways, it allows the city to review that. It also allows you to all comment in on it, and it allows us to do a proof of concept. What we're suggesting as the development team, can we actually execute it, provide the roadway design and infrastructure, and then implement that into the city? Next slide. So I just, again, you can go through this. These are the things that it really does. It identifies consistency with the plans that are in place. So the comprehensive plan, the other master plans, transportation, housing, all of the guiding documents that a city puts together. So we look at these and then we look if we're being consistent with that guidance. Then also the major requirements. What are the open space requirements? What happens on the roadways? Affordable housing, street improvements, all of those. And then most importantly, I would say from a neighborhood perspective is, what are the major flaws? What are we missing? What do you want us to see? What do you want us to incorporate? And then again, it provides that fact-finding and proof of concept for us as the development team. So this is what it's not. And I say this and I hate to do it this way. We're not trying to avoid questions, but it is not a site design. We do not know the architecture, all of those elements. It's not site specific. We do not yet do traffic studies and those things because we're trying to see what uses would be there. In a lot of ways, we're scoping a traffic study. We're understanding what your concerns are, what you tell us, what you'd really like us to look at. Then we will go do the traffic study based on those uses. And then also, so again, we don't get entitlements. We don't get approvals with this sketch plan. We take the next step in this PUD planning process. So this just shows it kind of in linear fashion, folks. This is where we are at. So we did a pre-application probably last fall, if I remember right. We did a formal application. We had a meeting in February. Some of you were probably here in February of this year. You gave us a lot of comments. You gave us a lot of great feedback. You gave us a lot of guidance. We have taken that in. The city did as well. And we have changed our sketch plan. So a lot of what we're here tonight is to show you a lot of those changes, what we think we heard, what we hope we heard correctly, and how we tried to address those. So we're here, we're almost in this review and resubmittal cycle, right? We heard everything, and we're gonna try to show you that we hope we heard you correctly, and the city, we've made changes to our site plan, and we wanna share that with you. Okay, plan evolution. This is what you really want to hear about. Everybody still hearing me okay? We're doing all right? Okay, very good. By the way, this rain is remarkable. I don't know if anybody saw the comparison to Seattle, but this year we have had 6 inches of rain and they have had 0.47. So I don't know what's going on, but it's pretty amazing. So plan evolution. This is kind of the community outreach, the way we approach it. You all are important. We think the adjacent neighbors, those are almost all of you in these neighborhoods, you are the most impacted. I think that can be in opportunistic ways. It's also the impact of traffic, the uses. So we think we should meet with you most often, hear from you and learn from you. Then the broader community stakeholders, and then completely broad, the surrounding context. I will say this is unique because it's Boulder County, it's Lafayette and Erie, right? All 3 cities, so we're here, we're going through Lafayette, but I think it's important to know it. Again, I'll show, we hear the responses that we sent into the online illustrative plan. We had our last meeting on February 9th when we kind of shared this vision with you. Next slide. So this was that plan that we showed. We have the arrow above the illustrative plan. for a reason. This is what was shared with the community back in the end of the year and all the way through February. So that illustrative plan that we first shared with you was this site, okay? So just, if you haven't been here before, this is where we started in February. I'll talk a little bit about it. Overall, we kind of went through the units. We were right at 700 multifamily units on the site. You can see the site, primarily the western half of it was residential here, had kind of a main street coming in, and then retail really all across here. In a lot of ways, you see the depiction here that shows it. It kind of mimics what happens along this roadway, along 287 to the south. It had kind of a parking field, more of a commercial view, but then we were proposing a pretty significant change, a mixed-use neighborhood, but we were showing all of this as 5-story product, right? So we were showing 5-story. I will tell you the truth, I don't think we got a lot of support for that. I think it was pretty clear that people did not like that. And we showed that. This is a massing exercise, but you see the 5-story. We were trying to pull the retail into the ground level and then go up to the 5-story. So it really created more of kind of a height and intensity on the site, right? So I can go into more detail, but this was the site plan that you've all commented on previously. This was the accompanying documents. So I just want to understand, as we've revised this, we've kind of revised the entire submittal. So it shows kind of land use categories, if you will. The yellow was the residential, the orange was mixed use, and the red was commercial, right? You see kind of the context of this. It was almost in some ways laid out on a true linear north-south fashion, almost in thirds, right? Really that commercial corridor up against 287, some capping of the site on the north to the residential. That very important, the open space was distributed, right? There was the Erie, the water park, or the water tower park, I think we called it, and then this green space here. So you can see that, and then the infrastructure, the layout, and the landscaping, of course, corresponded to that plan. Again, let's show you kind of how we're addressing some of these changes. So this is what we heard. And you all did a great job. I think there were 200 comments, and then probably that many questions and comments in the neighborhood meeting. These are our words, so if I say them wrong and you felt differently about it, it's perfectly fine to let us know that. We heard a lot about balanced density, right? And what I mean by that is a lot of you just said it was too intense, right? It was too high. You didn't have a lot of 5-story buildings. That second bullet that talks about Lafayette character and scale, we heard a lot about that, right? Are there other buildings in Lafayette that are that tall, that intensity? We want to understand, why are you pressing kind of the density and the impact of that? Really good feedback on the safety and the pedestrian connectivity. How does it work? How do you get people in and out at a pedestrian level and a vehicle level? Some about the transportation hub. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's a planned transit line, a bus rapid transit line on 287. There was a lot of people that wanted that more integrated, if you were, into the site to how we were planning it. The natural areas, I will definitely show that. We heard a lot about the detention basin, right at the corner of our site that touches 287. I was just out there the last hour. You all live here all the time, but when it wasn't raining, I kind of walked around there, and it is remarkable, that area. It is also remarkable to think of the topography of that site, right? If you're there right at 287, and you look at the silo neighborhood being built, the base of those homes are all well above the hill, right? There is a very substantial grade change as you move to the west there. And so it's really important. You see why it drains, some things we'll talk about there, but it's also important to see what opportunities we have to some ways build into that slope, right? To not pull up on that. So I just encourage you to look at that next time and really look at the grade change as you move to the west of this site. So the natural areas, and then traffic. I could say a number of things you all said about traffic, right? It's the patterns. It's how the heck do I get out of Stonehenge, right? How does this impact my neighborhood? Will it make it worse? What's our roadway? So again, I want to say about traffic, we haven't done a traffic study yet. That's not us not wanting to address it. It's understanding the background traffic, the existing traffic that's there today, and trying to find uses that we think will change that traffic pattern. Okay, so tell us again your concerns about traffic. Maybe it's where we connect, but we're trying to address what we heard in this phase. Great, so how we balance it, we're trying here to take this community feedback, those 5 or 6 items that we heard, and really try to show that with what the comp plan says. So I won't go into a lot of detail here, and we did last time talking about the comprehensive plan guidance. So again, our responsibility is to read your comp plan, the City of Lafayette comp plan, and it says this area should be adaptable commercial. It's clear. The whole site is something called adaptable commercial. And so this is 3 bullets that really talk about what the heck does that mean? What is adaptable commercial? So it's new commercial centers, right? But in a more walkable transit and mixed use neighborhood. To have truly more mixed use neighborhoods, to provide, instead of just a standalone Lowe's with no housing, that you actually could live on the site, could go to the site, could have retail, restaurant experiences. So they're not single destination uses at each site. So really trying to create this mixed use neighborhood. Importantly, and I think the city thinks really in great ways about this, is how do you organize the community? The organizing element should be streets and public places. That's what we ought to think about instead of the way we've done it too long for parking lots. So we'll talk about how we tried to break up the parking fields and what continues to happen to the south of this site. And then always the adaptable commercial, what that is new retail centers. And then what happens in 15 to 20 years here? We want to have a place that can evolve over time and continue to add housing and other neighborhoods that or other uses that create a vibrant neighborhood. Next slide. Okay, folks, we're doing pretty good. I'm talking a little slow, so I'll get going. So what we do here, we take all of those things, the plan, the municipal code, the community feedback, and then here's where we did. We tried to focus again on these 6 items. Make it more walkable, balance that density, bring down the density. We heard you loud and clear that we had too much intensity on the site. More useful or respect for the existing green space and how we bring that in. Again, make our parks and the open space be organizing characteristics of the neighborhood. We have brought in more of a commercial anchor to this plan. Still absolutely focused on a mixed-use neighborhood, in some ways breaking the pattern of what goes to the south and how that happens, and then look at view corridors. Again, where I showed that massing model early, we started with the commercial, the parking, and then the 5 stories. So we're thinking more about those view corridors and how we protect sites as we move to the west. Revised, this is the revised sketch plan. Go ahead. So this is a little hard to show, when you look at the conceptual sketch plan again, it's just this site here in black. So what we're showing here is actually the proposed zoning, okay? So very hard to read, right? But it shows 2 things. This is the proposed residential district. So I wanted to show pulling the residential more out here to 287 to really try to address this area, right? We want to be sure that this whole pattern here of 287 is not all commercial and all parking. So pulling residential here, then we show a regional business district, the proposed C1. Again, this is just the zoning, the larger land use categories of this site. This is those kind of blocks or the graphic that we look at to just show the uses. So the land use key here again, the residential amenity, the commercial. What you see again now is really pulling the residential up to 287, trying to bring in more residential scale, particularly here to the north side. I think it's really important to break that pattern, to actually add a secondary access point here to break the scale and pull that forward. Still have a main street, but really make kind of a residential route. Thinking a lot of the Boulder County residents to the north, bringing that in, and also respecting in some ways how it responds a little bit to the existing retail south of Lucerne, and being appropriate about how we scale our commercial. Next slide. This, as you saw earlier, is part of the things that the city asked for. So again, the city will review this submittal, we go back and forth, we learn from them. But this shows the traffic and pedestrian network. So a couple things. The main blue lines, that's of course the main central gateway, that main street that we bring in. Again, we're showing here in kind of this pink fuchsia color, a secondary gateway that is in a lot of ways a residential circulation that kind of comes into the site, right? We have a bike share along this main street. Of course, we show bike lanes in the silo plan or the silo neighborhood, really connecting to those pedestrian walkways, and then of course a loop shared use path that goes through the site. The other thing I certainly will talk about a lot is the detention area here, the area that people have really pointed out, how to pull that in and make that a useful part of the site and really make it an amenity that it is. Next slide. The other thing I just want to point out on traffic and pedestrian, these are the things that we're looking at, reviewing, and the city is certainly planning. So we talked a lot last time about the 287 BRT, bus rapid transit station areas, the planning that's gone on. One of those is planned on our site. So again, pulling from the guidance that we have in this area and incorporating those changes as well. So this shows that evolution of the traffic and pedestrian network. So it shows the grid changing, again, changing the scale, particularly northern part of the site, really making that more true of a residential community. We got rid of, in some ways, the racetrack here. The open space we had in the middle of that, we got a lot of feedback that they didn't think that was useful open space, right? It was inside of the roadway. So we've separated that out. So really tried to organize it more correctly from our viewpoint and really bringing in, again, the scale of a residential neighborhood. This shows just calculations. These are very specific definitions, right? What is open space? What is a park area? The amenity and the detention. So overall on this site, we are showing 30% in total open area in our plan. And again, you kind of see the legend and some of the things we're showing. I want to just show here, maybe one more slide, but I want to come back again, this detention area. I want to point out, I think all of you or many of you know this is currently in the town of Erie, right? It's owned by the town of Erie. So that area there, we're certainly talking to Erie, trying to pull that into our site, right? And make that a valuable kind of amenity for the community and protect that use. But I just want to point out that this is Erie. Erie was also talking to us about a water tower here on the site. People asked us in this corner on our previous plan. That is no longer happening. We are not having discussions about that. So there will not be a water tower park here on this, okay? So I think it's a very important development. Some people really didn't like that element where we had it here. It was going to keep ownership. That has gone away and we're not pursuing that anymore. Next slide, Dan. I have to step back because I've got bad eyes, but this shows you probably some of the things that you as neighbors should really think about and things we're trying to talk about is the green space and the landscaping. How do we buffer this site to all of you? How do we transition it the right way? So you can see on the north again, thinking about that, the landscape buffer, that's a 40 to 50 foot, I think it's 40-foot landscape buffer that we're showing just south of Arapahoe. Again, with the active detention area, now currently town of Erie, but we'd like to annex that into the site, into Lafayette. The neighborhood park, right in the center of the park, again, instead of inside the racetrack, bringing this neighborhood park with the amenities here. We have neighborhood residential amenities, a playground there, really pulling in the natural elements. So a lot of people know Aspen Ridge, right? It's built right here today. It's right there in today construction. Ultimately, that will be constructed here and go all the way up to Arapahoe. So thinking about that trail connection from the sidewalks, the mixed-use trail, there's bike lanes here. So that's why we show a bike share road. So again, connecting to that Aspen Ridge and understanding that that's an important part of it. So we're not driving all of the traffic, which you all know too well, on Arapahoe 287. We think it's important to distribute that traffic. If I live here, I'm coming eastbound, maybe I work in Boulder, I'm coming eastbound on Arapahoe, and I live right here, I'm probably turning in here at Aspen Ridge, right? Instead of coming up to the main intersection where everybody does today. So again, it's constructed right here south, I guess, but that ultimately would come all the way to Arapahoe. Just I want to focus before I get it, this is some images, right, of those amenities. So the neighborhood street, the neighborhood character, thinking about that scale, it really feels like a neighborhood with a 3-story product. I'll talk about what we're proposing, but we have dropped all of this. There's one 4-story building being proposed, but we are showing 3-story. 5 stories gone, we heard you, significant reduction in height and number of units. But we need the same amenities, the shared path, the residential street, the entry arrival, all of those things that really hold the neighborhood and make it an attractive place and a very livable place. I'm going to focus for 2 seconds on that detention area. I call it active detention. We probably have people that can talk more about this. We have planners that are really thinking about it. I just want to share briefly, probably many of you know the story of that. That detention area used to be part of the Prince Reservoir system, right? So that actually used to be, very importantly, used to be connected to a freshwater source. It is no longer connected. It is not part of that system any longer, so it does not actually get water flow except from rain and events like this. So there is not detention or water connection that there used to be. So over time, that area is definitely going to degrade. It is degrading, but what we want to do is actually improve it. So we couldn't agree more that we think that's an incredible, valuable asset. I think it's so important for the neighbors here. I think it's important from a visual context to have porosity into the site. It's a very low site, right? As we all know, it drains there, but it also really opens up some view corridors. We want to protect that, but frankly, we want to make it better. So when we talk about detention, active detention, we want to actually have some drainage, some water go into that site, to plan improvements, to re-landscape some of that area to make it better. So I just want to be clear, that is going to change. If we don't do anything, we go away. It is no longer connected to a freshwater basin or freshwater connection. That will degrade. So we really want to bring that asset and continue to protect it. Next slide. That shows it. These are a few of those notes that I just shared kind of specifically about that detention plan. So again, look at that landscape. We want to change that, improve it. We think this is one of those kind of rare opportunities where we all love nature and the way it evolves, but it has changed because of development that has happened around it, right? It will change further. So we think there's actually an opportunity to preserve it, protect it, and actually make it sustainable because it is not today. So again, we're very focused on that node and how important it is to all of you as neighbors and also the transition into our site. So this is the revised illustrative plan. Some of you may have seen this in the documents that were sent into the city. So this really encapsulates all of those things we heard, and this is how it comes to live. So it shows it a little bit more in just kind of aerial view, showing the residential product, 3-story on the north side here. The residential that comes out all the way to 287. Still a main street with the retail here. This is probably a 13,000, 14,000 square foot retail pad, maybe a small kind of organic grocer, something like that, a small footprint, something there, and then a larger retail anchor here. So I'll point it out, coming in, we have in many ways consolidated the retail center here and allowed us to have true residential wrap and residential connectivity. Remember, we used to have this kind of odd park here, the water power, right, for Erie. And this, in a lot of ways, they didn't connect. We had our green space in the middle of the kind of the driveway. We think, again, trying to organize around this and have these great access, the patios, the shared path, all around the site, the landscaping buffer, to really knit together the connectivity from a pedestrian and a green space as well. Also, very important as we transition to the plans here, there's a shared bike path, things that are already happening in this neighborhood. It's important to have that residential front. Here, I just like to reinforce these residential looking at 3-story with the idea that they have like a front porch or front stoop, right, to really meet the street there at Arapahoe. So it looks like a residential edge. So I just love to have your feedback on that, you neighbors that are here to the north, but trying to just put a more appropriate edge with a significant buffer, a 40-foot landscape buffer. I want to point out here, because I'd be remiss if I did, this yellowish color, I think it's yellow, you're all seeing, these are 3-story units that we're proposing. Don't want to hide a thing. Right here in the middle of this site, we show a Type C building of 4-story product. So if you can see, I guess an upside down L there, that is proposed as 4-story. The reason for that is frankly just to have enough density to make this site work. Okay, so we've lost about 100+ units on the site, what we're proposing, but we are showing a 4-story. We are showing a 4-story here again, where we believe it is completely hidden from other residential areas, that your view path will not pick up this view of a 4-story product. It's not on an edge, it's not here at Arapahoe. And again, as you really look at the way this site digs into the hill, this is very high grade here topography. We think there's some opportunities to really take advantage of that grade change. So I want to be sure, we are showing a 4-story here. We actually think it works very well. Again, a secondary access here, more of a true residential feel there. Next slide. That might be it. This is a previous plan. Just, maybe we show them together. What we saw here that I think was kind of problematic was the rhythm of just parking embracing 287. The same shared context if you went to Kohl's, Walmart, all the things you see here. Is you see parking, you see regular commercial retail, nothing engaging the street, just the pads here, and a lot of surface lot. We really thought that was important to break up the scale and make this feel more like a residential lot. Next slide. We might be close. This shows them side by side. You can tell me we didn't listen or we didn't hear you correctly. The other thing I just point out, this side by side shows it best. This active detention area here, we had showed much smaller before, right? We had that parking, we had commercial against it. That's an open parking field. It didn't highlight it at all. By pulling this residential here, we actually make this expansion of that area an amenity area. So that's where we show a playground. We want to protect this space and frankly make it sustainable and make it happen. You also see the substantial increase of that. So the detention basin there is 2.5 acres. We're adding another 0.75 acres to this amenity zone. So again, you really get this extension of kind of the residential edge that pulls you in. This last thing, this is, everybody can understand how you look at a site, right? So this is from Arapahoe Road. I think in some ways we all think about the view to the west, right? So I'm going to be clear, right? This is looking at the view to the south. That's not how we think about it. But we think it was important for Stonehenge, for neighbors that are in Boulder County, to just think about that 4-story product. Because if we're here on the other side, the north side of Arapahoe, looking back, and there's a 3-story building. Yes, articulation, all the landscaping. Your view corridor is like this, right? As you look up, this 4-story product buried in the site here is not visible at all. It's not visible from an eye. We thought that was very important to not have that up against the residential or on any of the immediate edges or buffers. Again, the other thing I think about is this view, right? So we're going to show you some different, the changes in topography. We'll get that and add that to the presentation. It's just a change in height from here, how low it is up to this site, and how we're really able to take advantage of that and really kind of build into the hill in many ways with this 3- and 4-story product. Next slide. This is where we're at. I promise I'm wrapping up. We're in the city review. We get optional revisions. That doesn't mean like, hey, we're not going to listen. It means we get told to do things and make those improvements. We go back and forth. It's a very iterative process. We learn from all of you. We try to incorporate those items. Eventually, we will have a plan. We would then take forward to Planning Commission and call up to City Council. Again, just the sketch plan. No land use. It doesn't allow us to do anything. It doesn't mean we can go build on the site. Then we'd go to the preliminary plan. But we are going back and forth right now, understanding the comments from the city and all the referral agencies and all of you. This is that again. You understand the process. We might just leave this up or we'll come back to it. But we're in that first phase, starting the annexation petition, and the sketch PUD. Ultimately, each one of those steps goes to City Council and Planning Commission. That's us. I'm Marcus. That's our company. You can get a hold of us there. We have Andrea and Jeff is here. But those are the contact information for the city staff. We know that you should, and we encourage you to make contact and make comments directly. The city facilitates that very well. We'd love to hear from you as well. So that's who we are. We can do that. Again, our team is here. We don't have specific traffic studies, as I tried to explain why that's not the case. But we are here for question and answer. So maybe we go to that, Dan. Maybe we go back to maybe a site plan or whatever we'd like to do. So folks, I went a little long. I apologize, but we got plenty of time for question and answer if people would like to ask. Yes?
Yeah, I'd like to know, I don't totally understand where you're putting it. Obviously, it takes the last little open space that we have left around for we now have fox in our neighborhood all the time, eating our pets and whatever. That's being taken away. You're telling us that you're going to route your traffic so that no more traffic goes on Arapahoe or 287?
Yeah, no, I want to be sure, and I'm sorry if
You
you...
can't have that.
Right. So I'll repeat the question. Was I implying that we won't have any more traffic on 287 or Arapahoe, right? Was that what I was saying?
You can't get out of our subdivision as it is.
Right. So you're at Stonehenge, right, to the north of the site. Everybody knows where that is, Stonehenge to the north of the site. I think, again, so I'm not at all arguing with that. I think as you're saying, we're showing those 2 roadways. Aspen Ridge, right, is on the west end of our site there. Again, that's a western, if I'm headed east, I pull into the site there. So I understand. What we're trying to say is to try to pull some of that traffic in now, instead of all of it going to 287 and Arapahoe. We'd like to disperse that. Aspen Ridge will go on south here as well, right? As you've probably seen at the Silo neighborhood, that goes quite a bit south. So in many ways, we're trying to disperse that traffic. So we share your concern about that. We're actually trying to spread that out instead of putting it all on the same intersections.
You're not taking it away.
We're not taking it away.
It's going to decrease our property value because of all the traffic, the high rise that you're putting in, it's not gonna help us.
Yeah.
For like,
Okay, so just the question was, will it take away from your value, right, and add more? So I want to be clear, and this is probably just kind of what we do and work on. We think this is probably, we think this is actually something that today you go to a type of store, a retail anchor, and you're driving further away than this location, right? So if we bring in a specialty grocer or we bring in a retail anchor, instead of you driving 7 miles to that store today or wherever it is, we think that that's actually going to be a much shorter trip. It's actually less cars on the road. It changes that. And actually, if we would have done that throughout planning history, we would have mixed-use communities. Now we have retail, a restaurant, and a residential area. We are trying to incorporate that. And again, not taking any umbrage, we're trying to make true that vision in the comp plan of adaptable commercial on this site. So yes, back there. Sure. Yeah, so we're showing, and I'm going to look at these guys. Right now, we're showing this as a right in, right out, right? So what that means, if I'm going eastbound on Arapahoe, I could turn right in, right? I live right here in this unit. I could come in here, and when I leave, I could come out and go right out. I couldn't make a movement.
Will there be a light at the Aspen Bridge?
So that is not determined yet at all. That would be a study, right? I think that they go through. That's based on traffic counts, right? Which you certainly understand. I know you're up here to the north, if I remember
Yeah,
right,
so
right?
obviously this doesn't affect anyone else, it just affects my family.
Okay.
Since our driveway is literally, we're directly north of that road.
That access
So
right
I'm
there.
curious that if there's a light there, is it going to be showing us to otherwise how do we get out and run the driveway?
It's a great comment. I won't make others, but you're thinking exactly what we have to think about is there alignment? How can we align so there's actually access out of there? I don't know the answer on if there's a light there, right? In some ways that would allow you to get out no matter what, right? So I think what they do is they go through that study. The traffic study yields that, right? So what we try to do is say, hey, how many residential units are here? How many trips is that going to generate? And what does the traffic study show the improvements?
Well, and I just worry about people coming up like from Walmart and stuff.
Yeah.
They that close to get to Arapahoe to get all this stuff.
Understood. Yeah. I mean, I'm not arguing. It's interesting that we all know the capacity and the traffic trips here. A lot of ways, if I live in Silo now or I live right here, it makes sense to stay on this roadway. But you're saying don't make it a full cut through or a parallel road in some ways. Right? Is that what you're saying? Sorry.
Oh, I don't care if it goes all the way through, I just worry about the traffic.
Yeah.
I'm worried that people just trying to make it work.
Yep, very good comment. And we'll continue, probably talk specifically with you about that driveway and kind of how that gets laid out there as well. Yeah. Yes, sir. Back table as well.
I have a few questions.
One for you. No, I'm kidding. You can have a few.
You did a great job keeping the lights on
Thank you.
the meeting call. So if we sign up with our email, we'll get an email of these proposals.
Yes, you will. Yeah. And if it's okay, sir, what you would get is this audio recording of me laid over these slides. So it would be like, yes. Yes, sir. Yes.
And I want to know who's here from the city of Lafayette.
Sure. I'm going to have them, do you want to introduce or just, we have the planning director and our plan supervisor, project manager? Sorry, I apologize, yeah.
Okay. So I assume there's obviously going to be a committee on it, and you're going to study the traffic patterns of what's going to happen once we do all this. We'll be informed
Yeah.
somehow, some way of that information.
Absolutely. So one of the things that happens, and it's so important to track that development, right? So as we said, this is the sketch plan, but then saying, hearing from all of you, we're going to be told by the city, what do we actually want you to study in that traffic plan? And then we share that. So it's forthcoming, we will share it, yes.
And you will share that with us.
Yeah, and it's part of our submittal package. So it's hard, we can't email that document. It's probably a 500 page, but you're able to go look at that document. Yes. I'll come to you, sir.
From what I understand, you went from 700 multifamily to 600,
That's correct.
and from 1,200 more drivers in this area, and Route L 287 is already a mess. So, are you going to have to propose routes back behind like Coles
Sure.
to come out
Yeah.
as well?
So Aspen Ridge does continue south, right? That roadway goes behind Coles, right? And that goes down. The thing I would point out is you're right. The one 4-story building, I'm just looking here, it looks like that's about 118 units. The rest is 3-story. That is that use served. So commercial actually generates more traffic. So if this were a traditional power center or retail center, it would generate much more traffic. We think the residential is actually what could be on the site. We think that's the right mix of uses, and it's actually less traffic than you would get in a commercial center.
The red portion is
Yes, sir.
commercial.
That's right, yeah.
And then, that's pretty much all. Explain to me one more time adaptive commercial.
Yeah, so adaptive commercial is in the comprehensive plan. It's the land use designation for this site. And it says in the entire site in the area south of us, the city has identified it as adaptive commercial. The thought of that is for new and old retail centers, how do you make them more mixed use, right? To kind of overly simplify it. And so it's to try to make it much more walkable, more pedestrian friendly, and true mixed use neighborhood, not just commercial, where it can adapt over time, as we develop 15, 20, 30 years from now, to have the parks and the streets be the organizing fabric rather than parking lots. So it's really the evolution, if you will, of better commercial and mixed-use neighborhoods.
Okay, I have one more.
Yeah, no problem. I see the other 3 signs. I'll come back.
The Lowell is over here.
Yes, sir.
That's Erie.
Uh-huh.
Behind there's apartments.
Yes.
They built. How many stories are that?
They are 4 stories. Most of them are 4 stories. Yes. Pardon?
That's Erie.
That is Erie. They
Yeah.
are 4 stories. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you. Please.
There's a question over there first.
Oh, I apologize. Go ahead. Sure.
So if I remember correctly from the first meeting, it was a total of 677 multi-family units.
Okay.
Can you give me the precise number that is represented here?
I'm going to make these gentlemen pull up that precise number. So, guys, do you know that? I will get that answer in just a minute. So if there's another question, go right ahead.
So
Yeah.
you had averaged it from 700 to 600.
Right.
I remember it being 677.
Yeah.
So if you are about 600, that's a reduction of about 75 units.
Sure.
Ballparking it. One of the things that widely was expressed at the last meeting
Yeah.
was concern about our natural resources and the use of, for example, in the past year, I think that the city of Lafayette has sent out 4, 5 notifications about reducing water. It was brought up at the meeting that there is a deep concern about, at that time, 677 units and now 600 units,
Sure.
and our water usage. It was also brought up the fact that the Boulder Valley School District in the East County
Okay.
is bursting to the seams with, yes, we have a new school that is going to be going in, won't be ready for at least 5 years, I would think.
Sure.
And that will be pulling from kids from Erie, from Lafayette, and from Broomfield. So with 600 units,
Yeah.
where are those children going to go to school? So you had said that you were hoping that we felt that you had heard our concerns, and I just want to let you know that I don't feel very heard.
Okay. I'm sorry. That's unfortunate. I'll answer first of all. I want to be very clear again about this is not site plan specific. So we're giving kind of general numbers, right? Because it could certainly change. We're going to get feedback. We're going to get feedback from the city about maybe how our parking lays out and how that changes. So you're right. I am rounding to kind of that. Even saying that a 10% reduction in residential units is very substantial. That is a substantial.
For you,
Right.
monetarily,
No. Yeah.
not for us.
Well, to make the project happen, right? To do that. And I will also say, and this is, I'm going to stand my ground on housing. I believe we need to provide housing. I believe we need to provide attainable housing, and we know that has to happen. And no, it's okay, I get to answer this. And that's an important value that we're gonna fight for, is mixed-use neighborhood. What happens today in houses, 50% of your water use is outside today, and the worst thing we can do from a sustainability level is large lot single family. So you are seeing us put in a missing middle, kind of a more dense housing product, which is actually much more sustainable from a water standpoint. I want to be sure and answer your question on schools because it's important. The school district is a referral agency. They go through absolutely every one of ours. They have a plan that they know how many children we generate, and they plan and comment on our site plan. So again, 600 units instead of 600 units in a traditional neighborhood that's large single family. We'll have much less children here. It provides, again, that kind of missing middle housing.
So you were just talking about attainable housing. How many of these units are going to be affordable housing?
Yeah, so we will have affordable housing on the site. We don't know the exact percentage yet. We're working through that. We share that incredibly, that value that we need so desperately. We will have a substantial percentage on the site be affordable. So we're working through that right now. Yeah. It will not be 40%. We do not know that number yet, but we're looking at it. I will say, just from an attainability standpoint, that's not what you asked about affordable. So we will have some deed restricted, permanently, some affordable housing on this site. Then also just the multifamily, that price point, although it's high, it's certainly more attainable than a large lot single family home that's being built right across the street. I think you were next, right? And then I'll come back there. Yes.
Take the microphone.
If you can just ask me, I'll give the question. It's to ask questions, sir, and then I'll repeat back.
I do have a question, but I want to show what the basis of my question. I agree that the density going down by 10% doesn't address the issue that we raised.
Sir, if you ask me the question, I can share it because nobody can hear you.
This is the Lafayette homepage. Look at what Lafayette presents to the world as the first impression of Lafayette. If you go to that site and not get killed, this is what you see. You see what looks like the Lafayette homepage. Beautiful view of North Arapahoe. Fantastic. I did a little math. You put 4 stories there, and this is what it looks like. So you've looked at view corridors, but you haven't looked at the west view corridor. So you've got homework to do. Look at the west view corridor, and you'll see that what Lafayette presents to the world is gone. And this would become the northeast entry to the city of Lafayette. So what do we want the city of Lafayette to present in its northeast corridor? Do we want to present Lafayette? That's fine. But here's a way of doing it that doesn't violate this, and that is maximum of 2 stories will accomplish maintaining the view and giving you housing. So I have handouts with the map, which I will give to our Lafayette representative. I'll give it to you guys too.
Great. Thank you very much. I think everybody heard it mostly. So folks, again, sir, go ahead. Yeah, thank you. So we'll take it. Very good. Thank you. So I appreciate that again. I think one of the great challenges we have in any place that we come look at is what does the guiding documents, what do they say should be here? In my humble opinion, from a planning standpoint, this is not a 2-story product. This is not a 2-story neighborhood. It is a mixed-use neighborhood. And to have actually a successful mixed-use neighborhood, you have to have some appropriate density. So that's why we tried to pull back from that much higher number into that. I think you were next, or you two. Go ahead, sir. Yeah.
On Arapahoe Ridge, meeting up with Arapahoe.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Aspen, I should say.
Aspen Ridge, yes.
Aspen Ridge, meeting up with Arapahoe. There's some questions as to whether there will be a light there. If there's a light there, and then you go east, there's another light at 287. Then
Yes, sir.
you go east, and there's another light within a block to go into Lowe's. Then you get on the back side of Lowe's, there's another light. Then you get down to 111, and there's another light.
Right.
We've got a tremendous amount of lights, and it's just going to back up traffic like you wouldn't believe. it's gonna be a mess. It's a mess now. And this is going to just make it worse.
So again, I understand and I appreciate your context. I think what we do is we work very closely with the Boulder County Transportation and also the City of Lafayette to get those comments back. So we get told what improvements should be made from a transportation standpoint. I'm not at all, you're accurate, all of those are accurate. I don't know that this will say that there will be a light there, but it's the things we think about from a connection, should it line up with the driveway to the north, right? So those are important. The other thing I will say, and I'm not trying to say from 287 or Arapahoe Road as you mentioned, but at some point, traffic is traffic, and the real problem of traffic is speed and not being able to move. So some segmentation and breaking up of that traffic flow, I understand it slows it down, but that's really in a lot of ways somewhat what we're trying to do, is not to have the speed just flying by on Arapahoe where you can never get out of that neighborhood. So again, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that's what they actually think about, is how do we segment and break up some of that traffic so you can actually get movement. The other thing is, sir, is pushing that, again, to that Aspen Ridge, right? Some of our traffic that goes south, so it doesn't all go to 287. The last thing I just want to say, folks, this site is someday going to be developed. It is in the comp plan, it is in the growth plan. It makes perfect sense that this will be developed. Across the way, the Lowe's Center is a commercial center. It has retail or residential at the back, 4-story. It generates much more than we're talking about here. We're trying to find that blend of a mixed-use community. The other corner is also developed. I went to the Starbucks there right before I came to the meeting, right? It is there, the grocery store. This is in the pattern. It is going to develop it. We want to do it in the most sustainable and respectful way. So I'm not taking that, it's just going to happen. And large lot, single-family houses is not what's going to happen. It's not the right land use, it's not what the guidance says, and that's not what will end up there on that side. Yes, sir.
We've got King Supers that is breaking ground right now, at Lowe's right now.
Yes, sir.
They'll shut down King Supers over here on baseline. Eventually, there's going to be a tremendous amount of traffic going into this area right now. A massive humanity coming straight into here.
So the reverse of that, I don't know. I'm sure everything you just said is very accurate. The reverse of that is also true. Everybody from your neighborhood goes to that grocery store today, drives by the site and comes back. So that's what happens in these centers, is we don't know the ultimate answer on that traffic pattern. But that's why we study it, we go through it, and the city tells us to make it. I just want to show, I understand we all want to go like plan a site the way we see it. This is the comprehensive plan for this site. This site in yellow, the entire area here is adaptable commercial. It's not single-family neighborhood, it's not 2-story. It shows adaptable commercial that happens in the mixed-use neighborhood format where you integrate housing to it. We didn't do this, nobody did this. This is a planning process that the city went through to plan this intersection for the future, and that's what we're reacting to. Are we being compliant with the guidance that's on the site? Back there, yes. Sorry, you were first and then the gentleman.
So I couldn't see the plan super well from back here.
Sure, I apologize.
My side isn't the best. But I was just wondering, basically, I couldn't really tell, are there like plans for sidewalks there that are going to
Yes.
be wheelchair accessible? Because it's just really important to me that we have accessibility in our communities, because a lot of places in Lafayette don't even have sidewalks, you know?
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if they would be there and if they would be accessible.
Absolutely. The answer is yes. I'm sorry you couldn't see it very well. I couldn't see it this close, so I know that's hard to see from there. I just was out there, as I said, again, looking at Aspen Ridge and seeing that shared use trail that's there. It's accessible as you've seen it there, just south of Lucerne, right, that intersection. That continues on. We actually want to connect to that. So the fabric of the sidewalks, this is a missing site today. I walked out to the detention area. One, it's wet, it's raining, right? But there is nothing there. There's no connectivity, there's no way. So we think that's actually one of the most important values on all edges of that site. From the north as well, understanding the articulation of the final design of those 3-story, but having that 40-foot landscape buffer and trails there is really important as well. Yes? Oh, there was another one. Sir, on the table.
Yes, you talked about this neighborhood. It's supposed to be, very walkable and pedestrian friendly. Can you walk us through, like, how does it connect, like, surrounding neighborhoods? So, like, how can I walk right in and out of the neighborhood?
Yeah. So guys, I apologize. I switched this out, our presentation, so we got to go back to the other one. Jasper, can we go back to be able to share that? So sure, I will come back to the plan and talk about that. I think one of the things our planners design workshop has really thought about is just that. Not only the loop trails of our site, but then particularly, I'm speaking about Aspen Ridge right now, right? Thinking of those connections, there's now a shared trail that goes all the way south of this site along the Silo neighborhood. Do we still call it the Silo neighborhood? Is that what it is, by the way? It is, okay. So it shows that. Jasper will get there. Sorry, guys. But we focus very intently on that. So if you see where's we can make improvements to that, we think that's really important. The pedestrian connections. You're doing great. Let's come back to that. I'm going to wait for folks to show that. So this shows some of those trails. The overall, keep going, Jasper. A couple more shows this. Here you go. So this shows kind of the sequencing of that. If you look at this, it shows maybe one more back. It shows the connections here into the neighborhood, the bike connections for pathways, the shared trails that go here, and actually just bringing sidewalks and connection here. This is where that BRT, maybe nobody can see this, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, the bus rapid transit station here. So actually bringing in rapid transit here to the site at the residential entrance to really pull that in. And this green trail, sir, this dash line that you're seeing is that shared trail all around, and then really connecting here to other neighborhoods, your full point. Of course, the top crossing here, right, but making that connection, and then across the street here. I would say really looking at the immediate south and immediate west connection.
Yeah, so going to the north to the east, right?
Yeah.
Are there plans to connect to this intersection, or is this just
This year, sir? Yeah. Yeah, and I'm gonna be on. You're saying here, right, and off it goes. That's a little bit outside of my expertise. I know there are visionary plans about all of these connections. So I'm going to owe you that answer about that. And you know what I mean, sir, like what's there. What I would say today, this completely missing. So bringing access to those intersections is the most important thing we could do there. So if you talk about missing teeth and no connectivity, it's not there. The only way it happens is through development bringing those in.
There already is an intersection, right? That's really possible. Go to fucking north on my language, right? You can go from the Safeway over to the open Stonehenge, right? And you get in like nowhere, right? It has been like this in almost decades.
Yeah, it's exactly, I mean, we're not disagreeing at all. When you go through this process, we get required, as we should, to put in that pedestrian infrastructure. Yes. I think there's a couple more questions. I just want to check in. Everybody's doing great. It's 6:32, so Jokic has already hit his first turnaround jumper, but we're good. Go ahead.
Are the number of units determined by an average square footage? And so what is that number?
Yeah, so gents, you know on average square footage, we do lay them out as studio, 1 bedroom, and 2 bedroom. So there's a lot of different types of units. It's really about how they lay out, sir, on the street, right? And the angles of the buildings and all of that. I don't know, I'll ask these gents if we have an average square footage size. You can look at that print. That is on the table when we submit that. It goes through the type of unit that we're proposing. Yep. Yes, Karen? Sure.
Okay, so now Erie is not asking for the water.
That's correct.
So that pond, that area is in Erie. Are you going to purchase that as part of this? And this is my first question.
Sure.
Are you going to purchase that as part of this development?
So I just want to, Karen asked this question. We previously had proposed a water tower here, right, for storage for the city of Erie. That is no longer happening. We are not having discussions that would come into Lafayette as part of our annexation. Okay, so that, just to make that clear, this area, I think is what you're asking. This is City of Erie now, right? That site is today. Your question is, would we buy that from them, right? We're in negotiations with them. I don't know what that means. If we buy it, if we exchange, you know, whatever that is, but we're in full negotiations with them about that site.
So is your plan still, if you get that, to make that wildlife friendly still, not turn it into some human parading through, but to make it a natural area for wildlife?
Yes, and what we're showing here, and I know you saw that in the map, we think that this can be better than it is today, and certainly better than it can be in 20 years when it no longer has a water connection. It will degrade. Not today, it's got amazing drainage coming to it. But Karen, yes, we think this, as you can see, we're not putting trails throughout it, right? We're not breaking that up. If you start seeing a grid of trails, come see me because we're not honoring it, right? But we're staying on the outside of that, really trying to improve that, letting water flow actually protect that, become more sustainable. I do want to show why we show that trail there. That's that expansion of that area and really trying to add the playground, this neighborhood amenity here, because this is that residential connection, trying to lay out the neighborhood more against this amenity and that amenity. So we don't want to change that at all, we want to make it better.
Okay, then why you put the bus rapid transit right next to
Yeah.
the wildlife?
So I get it, I understand that. I mean, yeah, it's good feedback. You're sitting by folks from the city, maybe that's what they tell us as well. I think part of that challenge is 287 is something, right? So you want to have the ability to kind of pull off and have a safe place, right? So in some ways we've separated that from the access points. Karen, we think that might be the right place, but we're going to go through that, right? So I don't know that we know the answer. We know that in this area, we need to have that BRT. We actually think it's very valuable to the site. Maybe it connects here, maybe it's more right here, but we just want to have that right on that board.
And one more, like,
Sure.
those two, up at the top there, if you have where those apartments are going to be.
Yeah.
That those two squares, rectangles, those buildings are totally focused around parking.
Yeah.
I mean, their view is going to be of the parking lot.
Inside, interior.
Interior, yeah, which is totally opposite to what you said earlier about not focusing on parking and part of what this whole adaptive. So that really jumped out at me.
Kind of
The
in
first thing I
here.
saw was like, this is just, they're all going to be looking at the parking, at their cars.
Yeah. So really fair point, and I think you're saying kind of interior, if you will, units, kind of looking at it. I think that's our challenge. One thing I will say is I think maybe we're being nicer than normal to neighbors outside of the site, right? Looking at it kind of residential. That's the view protecting, transitioning to the neighborhoods, buffering that. But Karen, I think you're right. We're not probably done yet on the full residential layout, right? This is more about a residential use. I think we're really trying to think about the edges of this site, but you're right. This probably needs some improvement on how that happens. We think this is really a great improvement, having this more residential area here on the north and pulling it out, but we probably have more work to do there.
One more on that.
I'm going to quit talking because I keep giving you more ideas. Yeah.
The big red box.
Yeah.
Do you have a tenant in mind for that? Because that's a massive area. And
Yeah.
people are wondering, what the heck could possibly go in there?
So we have, these guys, I always looked at like, oh boy, what can I say? So we have a lot of interest in that site, right? So retailers that are interested in that site are certainly contacting us. They're very well aware of the use that could be there. You know what's around, right? We know the Lowe's, the Home Depot, you know, the grocery store. So we hear from Target-like users. We hear from that type of user on that site. It's shown as 100, right in that square footage there. So that's the type of a user, more of that. Of course, there's the Walmart south of there. So I think it is more of a retail anchor, but it's that type of user. We also hear, and I just, you know, this maybe a small specialty grocer, that's about a 13 to 15,000 square foot. So I just want to show, like, those are the type of users that we're hearing from on this site. Yeah. Trader Joe's. We hear that. We hear that suggestion for sure. Yes. Yeah.
Sit-down restaurant.
A sit-down restaurant. We agree with that entirely. Yes. Yeah, not a fast casual. All right. Noted. Yes.
So that northern, on 287,
Uh-huh.
northern entrance right there.
Uh-huh.
You know, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that makes me nervous.
Okay.
Because you have people that are going east on Arapahoe and then turn south on 287.
Yeah.
They want to merge into 287. Yep.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have people coming south on 287 who want to turn into that, and then you have the BRT. That all feels like an accident waiting to happen. So I kind of feel like it's all over.
Okay.
But then also, yeah, and having the BRT there, how often does that run? Is that supposed to service people on both sides of the Arapahoe, or is it across the street?
Great. So really good question. It's 287 is the bus rapid transit line, right? So this is viewed as I think a station or a hub, right? So you can't see it. I'm afraid this may reiterate your point. We actually kind of show a pull off, if you will, right, off of that roadway. What you're concerned about is this motion, everybody moving over and people trying to get into that. So we understand. I think we're really trying to be cognizant of that. Karen's point about against the detention. We want that to also be the safest spot, right? So how do we incorporate that in and protect it? So we'll look at that. I think, and I'm sorry, I don't know how many stops there are on 287, but that is planned as a 287 bus rapid transit system.
And then where do you park?
For that site, we have some shared parking. Again, we hope it's people that live there. That's why it really responds to the density that we're proposing, our units. I hope somebody lives there, gets on that bus system and goes south to work or north to work. So yes, we think, but importantly, just like we've done on other sites in Willoughby Corner, you have to have residents living there for a transit to actually work. And so those 600 units are as much about that stop as anything else is. How do you go north?
Walk across?
Yeah, I will owe you that because I don't know the network of where that goes north and where that station goes from there.
Lucerne.
Pardon?
There's Lucerne, it's a bus stop on Lucerne.
Lucerne and 287.
There's two BRT routes being studied in this area. One on 287 north south, one that goes along Highway 7 east-west. They both merge at this intersection. The city, in conjunction with the town of Perry, Boulder County, and the CDOT are looking at the station area location and design. Part of that exercise is looking at the underpass across the 287. We want to get people safely from the existing neighborhoods to these facilities to make it great for them to be able to use them. So that's kind of what the study is looking at right now is how do we connect? What's the best location? How do we connect it? And then if this project moves forward, how do we best integrate it?
Great, thank you very much. 2 follow-up answers. 601 units is what we show in this submittal. Sir, in the back, we show 66% of those are 63% of those are 1-bedroom units, and we can show you that chart that kind of breaks down the square footage. Look at that. Yes. I think I'm going to just tell us, and I apologize, folks, the church has a remarkably busy schedule. So they have another meeting, a reception in here in a little bit. So we've got a couple more questions, and then I can stay and answer those questions. So I just want to be respectful. We're at 6:42, so I'm going to take 2 more questions. So, sir, do that one.
Yeah, I talked about the traffic study. When is that going to be done, and is there another comment, open discussion, comment on that? I know something's going to go in this site. Somehow something's going to go in here and it's going to add traffic. So
Yes, sir.
what it means is, and this was brought up before, wasn't that meeting? Getting in and out of Stonehenge is very difficult, and it will only get more difficult. So my question for those who put this study together is how will we safely get in and out of the neighborhood? Already people are adjusting, blending into the neighborhood because of the traffic. We put in, and at rush hour morning and afternoon, it's very difficult to get in and out. So what can be done to safely get in and out? There's not a protected way to get into the neighborhood from Arapahoe. How will we change that?
So I'm not going to have our traffic engineer is here, and I just want you to know, to hear that comment, the city does as well. That is something we have to understand and try to address, right? I know, sir, I keep calling it Aspen Ridge, is that right? Yeah, Aspen Ridge here. I know that's a different access point than here, right? They don't line up, and I know it doesn't interior. So that is it's an existing challenge. I know you know that, and we don't want to exasperate. We want to see if there's ways we can start to help try to provide solutions. I think in some ways, I know this residential, the buffering, that doesn't address the traffic, sir, the connection, but we're looking at that. The traffic study, yes, you get to go through that. That's part of the review process. As we go to the next level, the preliminary plan, we also start to integrate some of those. What we want to see is, are we roughly right about the residential units and the commercial square footage? because that's actually what a traffic study is. How many units do you have? How many trips does that generate? How many users come to this box? What's the overall traffic? And then that traffic study analyzes the intersections and future intersections and what those improvements have to be. So that is not in this phase, but in future phases of that.
Yeah, let me just add.
Sure.
It's not just about this site.
I
The
know.
area is improved now. And there's those folks in the morning who are putting the area all the way to the border.
Yes.
That road is just getting busier and busier.
I
This
understand.
only adds to that. I still, whether it's because of this site or independent of this site, anyone dealing with traffic design, we need to find a way to safely, a protected way to get in and out of the road.
Great.
So I just really want to emphasize it. Really hope that we can hear some kind of an idea about how to do that better.
Thank you. Very fair point. I understand entirely. Last question. I'm sorry. I'll stay out there, so go right ahead. Last question. Sure.
Yeah, so our comprehensive plan for adaptable commercial talks about 3 stories. It also talks about exploring strategic height in exchange for certain types of benefits, like affordable housing, like open space or parks. And so what is difficult here is we have a new comprehensive plan that was adopted 2 years ago. We have zoning regulations that were adopted 50 years ago, and they don't speak to each other. And so we're just now taking on, in the past few months, an effort to overhaul our development regulations so that the comprehensive plan and our development regulations align. Because ultimately, ideally, we want what can be built to be aligned with the long-term goals of the community. And we would have that discussion on height and what has to be done to get that height. In the development, we don't have that development. So here, we've got to figure out, kind of on an ad hoc basis, is the height appropriate, and what public benefits do we achieve out of development of this in exchange for that height? What do we get from this development that we otherwise would not get if that height were not to be allowed? That answer has yet to be revealed with regards to this plan. What does it bring to the table that we would otherwise not get with just 3-story or less? So that's one of the big questions that has to be answered and talked about as we evaluate any proposal on the project.
So I think there was, by the way, well, go ahead. Sure.
Yeah, we already have a requirement for a certain percentage of parking spaces to be equipped with chargers, to be capable of having chargers and to be future-proof. And we're just now adopting a new building code, which further refines that requirement. So yes, we are thinking of those things.
And yeah, I can just assure you from a development standpoint, we want those. We will have them. We need them as desperately. Planning director just did a very articulate and friendly way of telling us that we still need to prove why those 4-story element, what's the benefit the community's getting. I just want you to think about what we're thinking of. That building, I think, was 118 units. So that 4-story, if you think about that, is generally 30 units that we're adding in that one building. So we're trying to think about what is it about those 30 units, that element, why we're putting an interior. Does it lead to more open space? Does it support the transit? Does it do? So we have to go through that process of justifying that additional story. Yes, I promise. I think somebody's here from the next one. Go right ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm a resident of Lafayette, and I'm sure you've heard that the Border Enterprise Zone is $75 million in the hole. And actually, I met the council who said it might be as much as $150 million in the hole. And that was all brought about by sweetheart deals to developers
Okay.
So what I would like to understand, because I think the benefits of this project, or actually any project at this corner, is for one, the developer from out of town comes in, makes his money and leaves, that's your business. The city of Lafayette will get some retail sales tax.
Sure.
But that can't go into the enterprise fund, because that's a locked box, it has to be for water uses, in and out water uses. So my question is, would the developer be willing to make a contribution to the enterprise water fund for the citizens of Lafayette? Otherwise, I don't believe we get anything out of this development.
Okay, so I will, the gentleman over here took that question, understand it. I can't give you a full answer. You articulated it very well. Let us look at that. I won't argue about the benefits of that. I think what we're trying to do is bring forward a plan that really mirrors and tries to bring forward what's in the comprehensive plan, right? So I think to your point again, and Jeff said it earlier, we have to prove up the percentage of affordable housing, the open space, the transit connections. Are we listening? Are we bringing those benefits, right? So I will work on that and get you an answer back. Yeah.
But what it doesn't bring is it doesn't bring money to the enterprise fund. In fact, without money to the enterprise fund, it's actually a drag on the system and wears it down.
So we pay all of those fees. You sound like you know the differentiation of those, but water tap fees, all of those things, bringing water to the site, all of those same requirements apply to us. So we go through that. I don't know about the exact fund, how that gets distributed, but one thing I will say, we've often thought, we talk about developers kind of paying their own way, right? That's the concept that we think of. We are very keenly aware of that. We understand this, and that's what we're trying to do, is to find that balance of the right mix of uses, to not over-commercialize this site, because we need housing desperately, and we need mixed use, and we're trying to find a sustainable way. So I'm not avoiding your question. I'll find that answer specifically about that fund, but we'll look at that as well. Okay? I'm so sorry, folks. I know we have to leave for people that are here. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.